What's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 10 buffs and 10 nerfs which you want to see with the next set of balances. So balance changes happen every month or so, and it's kind of getting around that time now where I'm starting to get a little bit sick of the meta. Some brawlers are just way too strong and some brawlers are just way too weak. So hopefully some of these will change up the meta a little bit. So we're going to be starting off with the nerfs and starting off with one of the best brawlers in the game easily with Angelo. So there's a few ways that you could nerf Angelo. The first way being is that after a certain amount of time, just like Hank's bubble, your arrow would essentially like pop. So I would like this because this mechanic is in other games with other archer type characters. I just think it's too cheesy to hold on to a 4.4k shot for an unlimited amount of time. It means you just really can't approach Angelo, or you have to always approach him with caution. Again, they could just nerf the arrow damage, but I just think simply adding a mechanic where it pops at least gives you a little bit of a leeway so you can actually close down Angelo. The way that you could nerf Angelo is by reducing the movement speed. I don't think they'll do this. This will be like a last resort kind of thing, but I would like to see it just because very fast movement speed on a sniper is pretty cheesy, and probably the perfect way to nerf him, if anything, is just to increase his super charge rate, because the second that Angelo gets his super, he just gets so much map control and just making it so it takes 3 hits, and of course it actually allows him to heal less, because every time you're cycling super every 2 shots, you're just healing back to full HP, and that's a big problem with Angelo. He also just has such a big presence over those 10 seconds the super is on the floor for. So I think nerfing one of these ways is a big way to nerf him. Jumping into the next brawler I really want to see a nerf with, it is with Melody. So only Angelo and Melody I really want to see big nerfs with. That's why I'm kind of going in depth when I'm speaking about them. But with Melody, she could get one of 2 nerfs. I think the first nerf would actually be so she only gets 2 dashes. Again, this is kind of changing a brawler's mechanics, which could be pretty risky, but getting 3 dashes is just too much. You can just create so many good plays in Brawl. You can just fly up the map with your invincibility bubble, and you can just fly up to the safe way too quick. So either they can nerf it to 2 dashes, which would make sense. I think it's just too much mobility, or they could just simply make it so it takes 5 hits to get super, maybe even 6 hits to get super, so you're not able to cycle it as frequently. And also another nerf I'd like to see is just simply by nerfing her HP. It might be boring, but I think she has way too much HP, especially for someone that can just dash in. You need to be punished. So of course nerfing the HP allows you to kind of think about whether you're going to dash in or not. Right now you just dash in brainlessly and always get value. So the next brawler hopefully on the nerf list, it is Max. Although I'd like to see a small nerf to Max, because Max is only really good at their high level, and with the right player. Of course you can't be a good Max if you haven't got good jukes, but with the nerf itself, I think there should only really be a nerf to the hypercharge. The toxic thing about it is that it gives a movement speed boost for such a long duration after the hypercharge super. Like, I don't mind it lasting a couple of seconds extra, but I swear it's like 3 times as long. You get speed for like so long throughout the game, so nerfing that by a couple of seconds, that boost that you get with the energy drink, I think would be a nice nerf. Next up on the nerf list is Jean. So I actually wouldn't really want to see a nerf to Jean. I know I'm a Jean main and I might be biased, but at the same time I don't think Jean is that toxic. I don't think the majority of players think Jean is OP or anything, but he is a top 10 brawler in the game. So if you was to nerf him, I'm not actually too sure, because if you nerf the damage, then he's just going to fall off completely again. I think probably go the route of maybe his HP or something, just make him a little bit squishier so he's a little bit more vulnerable. Of course, Jean uses his teammates to protect him a lot of the time with the magic puff star power, so if you can kind of focus Jean a little bit easier with that HP nerf, I think that could be a good way to nerf. So next up, maybe on the nerf list, we have Belle. So Belle is still a top 10 brawler again because she's so incredibly versatile, and I couldn't really think of a way to nerf her without making her trash, because again, majority of players don't think Belle is strong. So if I was to nerf her in any way, it probably would be again a hyper charge rate, making it so it takes like 3 supers to get, or just nerfing her positive feedback star power. Again, it is a pretty strong star power. Just making it 15% instead of 20, it's not going to make it the biggest of differences, but of course you still need to look to kind of nerf Belle a little bit. So next up on the nerf wish list, we have Nito. So I'd actually like to see a big nerf with Nito's hypercharge. It's way too toxic right now. You get it within 2 supers, which is way too quick. For me, it needs to be at least 2.5 supers or 3 supers. The main reason being is because once you get one Bruce, it's so easy to cycle, and then of course you cycle to your 10k HP bear, and then by the time they've killed that 10k HP bear, you're probably over halfway to your next hypercharge. It's just way too quick to cycle, and they need to nerf this for sure. Next up, probably on the nerf list, we have Byron. So again, the majority of players don't think Byron is toxic or even good in the meta right now, but I think he's absolutely an S-tier brawler. He received like a 12% damage slash healing buff a couple of months ago, and that just skyrocketed him up the meta. So I'd like to see this toned down a little bit, because I think the healing is just too much. It's not even the damage, it's just being able to pocket heal people so consistently. Just nerfing this maybe like 2% or something would tone him down a little bit. Next up on the nerf wish list, we have Charlie. Again, it seems like every single time we nerf Charlie, it doesn't really do anything to her. Right now, she's still an unload machine. At close range, she just melts people. So there's a couple of ways that you could actually nerf Charlie. I think fundamentally her super is just way too strong. So if they're going to rework that in the future, maybe if these nerfs don't actually do anything, then maybe they need to rework her super in the future. But I think just nerfing her unload speed or her damage would be a good way to go, because I think right now a big problem still is that you're able to auto-aim spam so quickly onto enemies up close, and then you've just got other ways to protect yourself with a spider's super. So I think just making her a bit more vulnerable up close would be nice. So next up, hopefully on the nerf wish list, we have Piper. So with Piper, I think she's one of the most hated brawlers in the game right now, because she's so cheesy in so many different ways. She used to be one of the most skillful snipers. Now she doesn't really require too much skill. I think the main reason is because of the auto-aimer gadget. It is way too strong, especially at countering assassins. I think the good way to nerf this is just by simply removing the slow. They've done this with other gadgets in the past, like a Buster's pull gadget. So I'd like to see this nerf with Piper, just making her a little bit more vulnerable to those assassins. And lastly on the nerf wish list, we have Sandy. So again, the problem with Sandy is with the hypercharge rate. Just like with Nito, you can cycle this before you even get to your second super. I think it's around 1.66 supers, which is just crazy. It should be around like 2.66 or even 3 supers to get it, because everyone knows Sandy's super is one of the best in the game and always has been. So nerfing the hypercharge rate would be a good way to nerf it. So now we're going to be moving on to the buffs, which I want to see with the balances, and of course we're going to be starting off with Frank. And Frank, I've been asking for the longest time, the community has been as well. Just any sort of buff would be welcomed at this point in time. I think it's very clear that a rework is on the cards, but at the same time, he's just not receiving anything. So he'll infinitely be the worst brawler in the game. I'm just waiting for that buff. Please, Supercell. So next up, hopefully on the buff list, we have Hank. And of course, people were probably a little bit scared of whether Hank was going to be a strong brawler since the slight rework to his super, making it so it can heal him. I think it's been a nice change, but at the same time, I don't actually notice too much Hank getting that much better in the meta. I would actually just prefer for his HP to be back to his normal state, even an extra bit of HP. I still think he's one of the worst brawlers in the game. So reverting that HP nerf, which he received in the last update, it was around 7%, 800 HP. Give him that, see how it kind of fares in the meta. Next up on the buff list, we have Chester. So again, Chester's been needing some love for way over a year now. You've got to be careful, because RNG at the top level of play is a little bit scary, but at the same time, he still needs a little bit of love. So I'm unsure again whether Chester needs like a slight rework just to make him a little bit less RNG based. I know that's kind of his mechanics overall, but I think that would go a long way in balancing this brawler out. If not, they need to just rework his star powers. I mean, that is still a rework itself. I've been asking for this a long time. Bella Mania is by far the best star power, and the other star power is just terrible anyway. Probably should be a mythic gear. So I think just starting off with the star power reworks would be a good way to see how we can make Chester stronger. Next up on the buff list, we have Doug. So he received some nice changes a couple of months ago. It seemed like it helped him out, but it didn't really do too much. So I think maybe the way to buff Doug without making him Jackie 2.0 is probably just buffing his healing. I know it's a little bit cheesy just to be able to heal so much with one attack, but buffing the healing to like 1,600, 1,800 might actually give him a place in the meta, because right now there's just no reason to use Doug whatsoever. There's better healers, there's better damage dealers, there's better everything. So just give him some healing or something. So next up, hopefully on the buff list, we have Janet. So I want them to take a different route this time around. Again, it is another rework, but I think Janet needs it, because it's like this fine line between making Janet an S-tier brawler and an F-tier brawler, and it's always with the damage, the HP, the supercharge rate, and just flying around with these numbers. I think it's a little bit boring. We need to rework her star power vocal warm-up, because for me, it's just absolutely essential with Janet. Without it, she's just even more trash. But at the same time, there's just no point using her other star power because you need this star power. It's the same with like Otis, Chester, etc. So I think reworking it, adding a different star power. I don't know what star power they can add, but I think this is a good step to make Janet a little bit more of a balanced brawler mechanically. Next up on the buff wish list, we have Squeak. So I don't actually hope he receives much of a buff because he's a toxic brawler in nature. So with Squeak, it's a hard one. I couldn't really think of a good one. I think a plain and simple boring one would be increasing his damage. We're seeing to do that a lot with so many brawlers in the meta, but I think that is the main problem with Squeak. Unfortunately, right now there's just so many better brawlers with more consistent damage output, and he's just falling down the meta because of this. So buffing the damage would bring him back up to pace with the meta. So next up on the buff wish list, we have Penny. So Penny seems to have the same problem with Janet, where if you buff her HP or you nerf her HP, buff the damage, etc., she just seems to go either S tier or F tier. I think maybe just going down the Mr. P route a little bit, try and buff her turret a little bit, the HP. I know it's not really going to do the most, but I don't know, maybe it just allows her to tank a little bit more, allows her to waste the opponent's ammo a little bit more, taking that turret down. I don't know, if we just need to try something a little bit different rather than just messing with the damage and the HP all of the time. Next up, hopefully on the buff list, we have Daryl. So again, Daryl, just like Frank and all of these other low tier brawlers, just seem to get neglected time after time. Even the projectile buff did nothing to Daryl. So again, I'm crying out for some love for his overall kit, his gadgets, his star powers, all of them are just trash. Plain and simple, all of them are terrible. I would just like to see maybe one star power and one gadget just receive a little bit of love. Or I would actually like to see a little bit of a different change, increase his super range, so he's able to get onto the high safe a lot easier. This also makes it so he can tank more, etc. This would give Daryl a little bit of love because right now he's just definitely an F tier brawler. So next up, hopefully on the buff wish list, we have Lou. So another brawler that has just shrunk to the bottom ever since getting a super charge rate nerf. I think reverting this would actually go a long way, but then of course increasing the amount of time it takes to get his hypercharge would be a good way to actually balance him out, because right now it just takes too long to get his super, plain and simple. That just means other brawlers are going to be able to impact the game a lot more frequently, whilst Lou is just constantly stuck without his super. So making it so it takes 7 hits instead of 8 to get his first super would be pretty nice. So moving on to the final change I want to see, and it's with Maisie. So again, another brawler which suffered from success in the fact that like her hypercharge was broken and then they had to nerf her super charge rate from 3 hits to 4. I think, I don't know, I don't really want to revert that change because still it's pretty toxic to be able to chain supers so frequently and being pushed back and stunned and whatever else. Just if it isn't fun in Brawl Stars, I'd actually like to see in a main projectile speed increase, so it's a little bit easier to hit your shots. I think that's the main problem with Maisie. People can just shoot those shots too easily, but then once you get your first super, you can still chain pretty effectively, but it's all about getting that first super. So increasing her projectile speed will allow her to cycle a lot more successfully. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comment section below how you'd like to see some reworks to some of these brawlers like Frank, like Chester, Doug, Daryl. You know, there's quite a few brawlers that need some love in the meta. So that's going to be it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.